Okay. So thank you for joining us for our first ever ALD Talk series. We have the wonderful Sarah Hyde-Williams joining us today, and I am so glad that she's going to be talking to us about long-term care and helping guiding us through that. She has a series of questions that we are going to talk with her about. And then if you guys have questions for Sarah, she's open to answering that. You're going to be just as impressed with her as I am. She has a wealth of knowledge, and I think that she just does a fantastic job. But I'm really excited to start our first series with Sarah. What I will do while we're doing our question part is I'm going to mute everybody just so that the background noise doesn't distract Sarah or myself and everybody can hear. Then after that, if you have questions, you have the ability to unmute yourself as well. So if you have a question after we're going to ask like 5 questions or so, then you can go ahead and do that. Sarah, it might mute you, so if I don't do it, can you do yours? Perfect.
Yeah. You want me to mute right now? Unmute.
Okay, okay. And Sarah, you might try, okay, there you go. So Sarah's unmuted now. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so everybody, again, thank you, Sarah, for joining us. Will you please give us a little bit about, if you don't familiar with Alzheimer's Texas, we have been serving the Central Texas area since, I guess, 30 some odd years, since 1982. And one of the services that we do is our partnerships that we have with different communities. And Sarah has been involved with us in different partnerships with her Lewy body support groups, helping us with their senior advisors. So I really thought it was important for us to have this conversation because long-term care is something that always has come up, whether it's a care consult, whether it's an education program that we do. It's a question on what is it, who pays for it, all those important questions. So I wanted to start there. Sarah, you can introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I love Alzheimer'S Texas. You guys do such phenomenal work. I look at your website all the time trying to find some resources for my clients. In a nutshell, I'm an elder care consultant, a dementia practitioner. I'm a certified Alzheimer's disease and dementia care trainer. I do a lot of training in long-term care facilities. I am certified in Montessori as it relates to dementia care as well. And I am also the Central Texas educator for the Lewy Body Dementia Association. I began in long-term care about 18 years ago. It's hard to believe that long ago. I took a role within a home health agency based within an assisted living memory care community. And was hooked. Absolutely, won't be anywhere else. I've served home health companies as their liaison to the long-term care industry, but the majority of my work has been in working for long-term care. About 2 years ago, I stepped back from the industry to reevaluate where I was and where I wanted to be and how to serve best. Mm-hmm. And that led my husband and I to begin an elder care consulting agency. The name of it is Senior Living Advisors of Austin. However, we can advise either to the industry or to consumers, families who are looking for answers. And so that's the majority of what we do today.
Perfect. And that's just, you make it sound like that's just all. It's quite
that's
a bit.
All I do.
Such a great, you do a great wealth of services to our community. So thank you again. So when we talk about long-term care, tell us exactly what we're talking about. What can you define long-term care for all of us who may have never heard about that before?
Such a great question. Oftentimes when we're speaking with a social worker, a doctor, oftentimes, and they'll say, we need to talk about long-term care. Typically, our first reaction, what we jump to is nursing home. And days of old, that might have been true, but no longer. It involves care given over a period of time, typically end of life, however long that may be, 1 year, 5 years, 20 years, that really cares for a person's health and a person's level of care that's needed during that portion of time. It can be delivered in numerous amounts of services, whether they be community services. They can be delivered in the home if that's what our end-of-life plan is, or in a community type setting such as assisted living, memory care, true long-term skilled care. But when we're talking about long-term care, oftentimes what we're looking at is the actual hands-on care of what are oftentimes deemed ADLs, which are activities of daily living. And those are bathing, grooming, dressing, toileting, eating independently, and transfers. So when we have that slight circle, we go out a circle and we often talk about IADLs, which are instrumental activities of daily living. And those are some of those things that maybe we as family caregivers are stepping in to do right now, which are grocery shopping, delivering meals, transportation to the doctor's office, managing health conditions, managing doctor's appointments, and all of that. So I have a class entitled, Am I a Caregiver? And a lot of us don't even recognize we are currently giving long-term care to a loved one. It's an interesting conversation about how we see ourselves involved in someone's long-term care plan.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned that, because you're right. Sometimes we don't recognize ourselves as caregivers. We've been doing it for so long. Can you give us those demographics though, as far as who might need long-term care? We touched on a little bit as far as the end of life, but what are those demographics? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Very interestingly enough, we can see old 55-year-olds, we can see very young 96-year-olds. So age, oftentimes, because as we age, our bodies are not as spry and young chickens like we were. Age does have a factor in it. Another thing that has a factor is gender. Women outlive men. So typically in a long-term care setting, whether it be home or a community type setting, we see a lot more women taking advantage of those long-term care options. Marital status, the longer we are married and linked to a partner, whatever that spousal unit may look like, we live longer as well, and therefore one will care for another. Oftentimes we see lifestyle play into that as well. Diet, exercise, how well have we taken care of ourselves through that aging process? And then oftentimes family history we see play into that as well. If a heart issue runs in your family, diabetes runs in your family, or cancer type things, someone may need to tap into that earlier or later along that continuum. What we oftentimes see is it's no discriminator. It can be acute, such as a heart attack, a stroke, at whatever age. And then it can also be through those little bitty changes we see in our loved one that we may see over time. Let's say mom's short-term memory isn't as good as it could be, and so therefore need to step in and put some things in place according to mom's wants and wishes that will make end of life a greater quality.
Right. And that's a good point. Like you mentioned, neighbors, it could be a daughter, son, a child, or a spouse. So once we identify there is that need for long-term care, and I get this a lot too with concerns, it's a friend or it's a neighbor, what is the necessary steps? Like, what do we do to start putting that in place? What's the best way to start, I guess I should say?
Well, my preferred is I always tell people plan early. Not always can we do that. We as family members, friends, neighbors oftentimes get involved in someone's long-term care plan in a crisis. I love to counsel families early in that process, way early. Let's start talking about it. Oftentimes we as spouses know what our spousal person, our loved ones' wants and wishes are. We've talked about it for 40, 50 years of marriage. We as adult children not always know that. That's been a taboo subject. Mom won't talk about it. We don't even want to go there. But we do need to start planning early. It will give you the best options. It will help us honor through great dignity and great respect what their wishes will be in case something happens maybe acutely that we've not talked through. So early conversations, and often have that documented so that we know what that may look like. There's many ways of beginning to step through that process, engaging someone like myself. I'm an elder care advisor, someone who specializes in the market to be able to give you what your best long-term options look like and how much that's going to cost. One of my other favorite people to refer to oftentimes, which would be a good step, is what used to be called a geriatric care manager. They are referred to now as an aging life care professional. There's probably 5, 6, 7 here in the Austin area that are very good at what they do, are able to, they work for you as the client. So their initial consultation is a fee-based product. Mine is not. My initial consultations are always complimentary so that I know the dynamic of what we're looking at. But once again, either way you go is very good. Talk to friends, talk to families, get all your advanced directives, your paperwork, those 5 important legal documents that you need to have. Talk to your attorney. A good elder care attorney might be a good place to start as well. And your financial advisor is a good starting point. Have you taken out long-term care insurance? How do you enact that? What are the portions of that that qualify you to begin taking those monies? I work with a lot of financial advisors who call me and say, okay, we've determined they have a need. We've determined what that long-term care policy looks like. Now I want you to talk through their options with them.
Right.
So lots of good first steps, but speak with someone in the industry that truly knows what they're talking about. I'm always a little leery of salespeople. They're always looking to sell you something, but I certainly don't want to denigrate if they're a wealth of knowledge as well, but someone who's very firmly planted in the industry and can give you good basic information.
So let me ask you, you mentioned those 5 legal documents, those 5 important documents. Can you just review that so that in case anybody doesn't know those documents and they want to look those up?
Oh, good question. I don't have them off the top of my head. I do know we want to have what's called advanced directives.
Okay.
That is an actual legal document that you can, it provides for my wants and wishes for end of life. It's a will. Having a will is important as well. What's really important these days, and what I believe our hospitals are doing a very good job at, is what's called a POLST, P-O-L-S-T. It's a physician-ordered life-sustaining treatment. It is an actual medical legal document that gives direction to the medical entity on what you do want for end of life. That is growing in popularity, and you can have a social worker, a case manager help you with that document. A power of attorney is extremely important. I talk with a lot of folks. My practice really gears toward dementia care. I do a lot of dementia. And my first question is always, who holds the power of attorney? And you would not believe how many families have not put that in place. That one's kind of a slippery slope, because if we've not talked to mom about who can make medical decisions for her in case she can't, once we've already gotten a definitive diagnosis of dementia, it becomes a very slippery slope whether or not that's a legal document that mom can sign. And then what you may have to go down the road of is guardianship, which is takes a lot of time and is a lot more expensive.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think you did touch on those 5 documents that I've
Okay.
heard of the past. So, so you
Hopefully I did. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you talked about also like different options. How do you know like which is the best options for your loved one, and where do you go when you know that it's time to, you know, aging at home isn't the best, or how can a family know when it's time, or what are the options out there?
The question I normally, or the statement I usually say to families, if you're beginning to question, is this the right time or should we talk to someone? It is the right time.
Okay.
At least have a conversation. So we're already seeing some of those little red flags that make us question, does mom or dad need more care? Does my spouse need additional care that maybe I'm not able to give? Sometimes we see spouses get to their later years, 70s, 80s, 90s, and they are still full-time caregiving for their loved one, their person, I like to say. How much can they do? Are they completely worn out? They're not sleeping themselves? How good of a spouse can they be if they're a full-time caregiver? And so that leads us to the terminology we use. Are we giving care? Are we a caregiver? And is that the point we want to be at? Or are we a care partner in this, to where we truly work it together, either a health condition or some sort of dementia? So oftentimes by bringing people into this situation, we are allowed to take a step back and be a care partner, be the spouse, be the daughter, the son, and truly enjoy those special magical moments, rather than if we were a full-time caregiver, it will wear us out very, very quickly. So just by asking the question, you should have a conversation.
Okay, that's a really good tip. Like, you know, if we're already ready to have that conversation, then this is time to start looking at those options. And you touched on it a little bit about that you don't offer a fee for that first conversation. How can our viewers today who are on this call, or just anybody that if I want to share this information, how can they have more of a one-on-one conversation with you, or whether it's just like a face-to-face, or during this pandemic, however it's a Zoom or a phone call? Tell us a little bit about how that goes and the services that you do.
Well, we've had to pivot. I think pivot is the word that we're all using it right now. We have had to change the way that we meet families' needs. We started the business 2 years ago, truly having those over a cup of coffee, kitchen table conversations. I love to look every single family in the eye and really dig deep. Usually those are somewhere between 2 and 4 hour conversations of looking at the entire dynamic, the full family history. What is this brother doing and that sister doing, and how can we make that all work? We've had to change that. So I'm doing a lot more phone calls now. I'm doing lots of Zoom calls. We've got a brother in Virginia, a sister in Miami, someone else in Seattle. And so we're doing a lot of Zoom calls to meet the needs of my clients as well. You're always welcome to call me. I have, over on the other side. My screen is mirrored. My telephone number is right up here. That's my mobile number. You can always reach out to me and ask for a time to set aside to have those conversations. You can also go to my website. We just rolled out a brand new website. Lots of really great resources we're adding by the day. And that's seniorlivingadvisorsaustin.com. And find great information, engage with us there, sign up for our newsletter, and can really get some great information there. But just reach out to us. We'd love to have that conversation with you to talk through what makes more sense for you and your family, because every family is going to be different.
Right. And another common question we get is like the cost. And that's, can you touch a little bit about that also? Just because I know it's a big question on fixed income a lot of families are on. What does the cost look like? And can you give us just a touch on that?
So varied. It depends on how much interaction and how much the family or friends are willing to pitch in and take some of those services that otherwise we might pay for. So is one of the children, the spouse, a friend at church able to provide transportation? And if they're not and you don't have anyone, what are the costs associated to that? So we certainly look up options. If we're looking at home care, Medicare is a health insurance type product. It pays for absolutely no long-term care. It will cover acute care hospitalization. It will cover a short rehab stay in a skilled nursing, but it covers no long-term care. Medicaid, on the other hand, is a different matter. Medicaid will cover home care service for so many hours per week, dependent on what your monthly income is. It will pay for long-term care secondary settings, but in the state of Texas, those offerings are very limited. And typically in the state of Texas, when we're talking long-term care under Medicaid, we're talking skilled nursing facility, or oftentimes what's referred to as nursing home. Mm-hmm. So it skips all the way over assisted living and memory care. Otherwise, private funding, assets, stocks, bonds, long-term care insurance. What are maybe some of the siblings willing to pitch in and try to find those pieces of income that we can use to pay for that? The VA, interestingly enough, also has what's called an aid and attendance pension program. So depending on whether you are the veteran or the spouse of a veteran, if you're the widow of a veteran that has not remarried, you are eligible. You could be eligible if your veteran served during a declared state of war. We will, of course, need the DD 214 in which to determine eligibility, but there's a very easy process you can apply for. It's free. You do it online or go to your local VA, and they can help you with that as well. I think I've covered all the ways to pay for that. Yeah.
I think that's amazing. Thank you for touching on that, because that is, again, and I'm glad you mentioned the VA, because that's a source that so many people don't recognize or realize that might be an option too. Yes. Now, Sarah, I know you, besides doing all this wonderful work, you also do support groups as well too. Tell us a little bit about those support groups that you lead.
I do. I serve the Lewy Body Dementia Association as the Central Texas facilitator and educator. And when I became involved with the Lewy Body Dementia Association about 3 years ago, there was a facilitator here in town that did 2 support groups. And we were adding a third up north to serve this Central Texas area better. And so I added the North Austin group. Over the next year, that facilitator stepped down. And so I assumed all 3, and then we started a 4th. So we do have 4 groups. We have Kyle, Marble Falls, and Central Austin. And then our North Austin group has moved from Round Rock to Georgetown to better serve the Parkinson's group up there in that area. What's interestingly enough, if you don't know very much about Lewy body dementia, it's 2 sides of the same coin with Parkinson's. It originates from the same deposit of the protein alpha-synuclein. So when we oftentimes talk about dementia with Lewy bodies, we also have to talk about Parkinson's disease dementia. Interestingly enough, our Georgetown group that's a pilot program for the Lewy Body Dementia Association, and we are lucky enough to have one of only 6 in the nation. That group is inclusive of not simply caregivers or care partners, which all of our other groups are simply have those in attendance. But our Georgetown group also has those that are living with Lewy, those that actually have a diagnosis. So in that mild to moderate portion of the disease process, when they are able to fully benefit from a group discussion, we break out into 2 separate groups. Their group is led by a licensed marriage and family therapy associate, and I have the group of care partners. And so we discuss a certain topic, and then we get back together, and how can we work this together? How can we truly be one unit in working through the disease process? It is a magical group, absolutely love it, and it's very rewarding. But during this COVID-19 period of time, we've moved every one of those groups to an online Zoom call. So that has been challenging for some. It has been expansive to others, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to come to a group. And so they've been able to join in on groups. We probably have a dozen new families that, because they've not been able to come before, are able to come now because we've offered it on Zoom. So we will be actually keeping one of those Zoom calls per month to allow for those families.
That's wonderful. And you also do like a forum as well too, don't you? On top of
I
the
do.
groups.
You're gonna get into everything I do, aren't you? So,
if I had all day, I could. I just know you are busy. You are really reaching our families and our communities. So I really want to touch up on that, because I know that you do a tremendous job on that. So please let people know about this.
It's my absolute privilege. My why with dementia started almost 20 years ago. And when we have another hour to share, I'll share my why, but it's Miss Mary. So if you ever run into me or have a phone call with me, ask me about Mary.
Okay.
We do a quarterly Lewy Body Dementia Symposium of some sort. I like to team with a neurologist as well to provide the good basic medical information. And I provide the overview that's led by PowerPoint. And it's a really good hour, sometimes hour and a half, that we spend about that. Before our senior housing communities shut down to visitors, we hold a monthly seminar about all things elder care as well. And that's held at an independent living community on the north side of town. That is absolutely free of charge. It's a 1-hour conversation. We've touched on Medicare, Medicaid, long-term care planning. We've touched on how to hire a home care agency. So many different topics that you can imagine. We've touched on it, and we have a ton more. One of our most popular was caring for someone who did not care for you. That was a very powerful hour. Oftentimes when we have broken relationships, but yet we have a loved one that is asking us to come back into that relationship and give care to a loved one. And how do we work through those feelings of guilt and resentment and anger? And we will do that one again. We absolutely will.
That sounds like a really great one. That's
yeah.
really an appropriate one. That's wonderful. And like I mentioned in the very beginning of this presentation, this is recorded. So if you're just joining us, if you missed the very beginning of this conversation, everybody who's on this call will receive a copy of this presentation so that you can go back, listen to Sarah if there's a questions. I also, part of this conversation, I also want to open it up to those attending the call. So if everybody has the ability to unmute yourself, there's about 12 of us on the call right now, including Sarah and myself. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself at this time and ask Sarah. She has She's graciously giving us her time. You can tell she is really actively helping our community in different aspects. But this is an opportunity. If there's a question out there, please feel free and to use this time. But yeah, everybody should be able to unmute.
Hey, Sarah, it's Jennifer.
Hello, my friend.
Hello. Hey, so I guess the first question my biggest question is, folks get really overwhelmed, and I know what it's like. I'm a caregiver myself for my mother-in-law who has early stage Alzheimer's. Do you have any advice or where to go with driving?
Oh, I get that one a lot. So Jennifer, I'm going to throw it back to you for a second. I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Are you looking to have someone tell her she either can or can't drive? Are you finding that there are safety issues with that? Tell me a little bit more.
Sorry, and you hear my dog in the background. So my issues are, she's able to drive right now up until the grocery store and back without a problem. She's not been lost. But how do you make a determination, and is there a way to make a determination from a physician if you feel like they're really appropriately driving or safe to be driving? So I feel like right now she is, but that's going to change. And at this point, we've actually taken her keys away because of COVID, because we don't trust that she would be able to, wear a mask, put gloves on, protect herself, and that kind of thing. So any advice to you about, how to make that decision or where to go, physician collaboration, can you go to DPS, that kind of thing?
All of that. So my answer would be yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a support group on Saturday that was, I got the best tip ever. Usually what I tell families is let your loved one keep the key. Absolutely. There's freedom in knowing I've got my set of keys. If I want to go somewhere, I can go somewhere. Also have them keep their driver's license, whether or not it is a full out driver's license or maybe just a state issued ID. I usually tell families that it's a comfort measure for them. But you can either disable the car if that's their car and they're the only ones using it, or the great tip I got over the weekend with one of my support groups was put another key on their chain that looks like a car key but doesn't work. So
good idea.
They'll go out, they'll get in the car. They can't get the car started. Oftentimes, especially through the course of dementia, their processing skills, problem-solving skills are just not quite sharp enough to figure out why their key won't work. And then they get distracted or they get tired and they come back in. You can go to your medical professional and actually have the doctor have that conversation. Sometimes it's easier when they hear it from a white coat, and they can write a prescription. No longer able to drive safely. Sometimes that works. Other times it is more difficult, but you can go to DPS and request a driving skills test, and either they pass it or they don't, but some families are not willing to take that gamble if they do pass.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because it just gives them more
point.
ammunition. Yeah,
right.
I'm good.
I'm good, right.
Yeah. So you know your person best. You know what might work and what might not, and to approach it from a couple of different ways until something works or they get that realization. No, my key doesn't work. The car won't work. Has to be taken to the shop, or simply I know enough to know that I can no longer safely drive.
Great advice.
Yeah,
and
some families.
Jennifer,
yeah.
Sorry, Sarah.
Some families wait until that point to where that loved one either gets in an accident
Sure.
and harms themselves or harms someone else. And we certainly don't want that to happen. If we can intervene early, it's better. But I understand those are difficult conversations to have.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer, I was going to mention also, there is Baylor Scott and White, I believe, or St. David's has the adaptive driving program that you can also go through. And they do it's through occupational therapists. And what they do is they'll do like different simulations, different testing before then they do a driving, like getting you on the street to drive. And it's usually a good assessment for a person also if that becomes a conversation of when it's time for the driving to cease, or maybe they can still drive very well, but navigation skills aren't the best. So you're hearing it again, like what Sarah mentioned, a white coat, you're hearing it from a professional. And it's an adaptive driving program that it's, we often let people know about that program because not many people do know. And it's through their occupational therapy. The other one, like Sarah said about the key, the remote. You can take the battery out of the remote because most cars, have that fob, and you can take that battery out. And that's another helpful suggestion besides maybe taking a spark plug or something, a battery out of the car so that it could die out and the car wouldn't start. But completely like what Sarah says, like your loved one, your family member, and you try until you succeed. But those are those different programs that you can look into as well.
Well, thank you so much.
Great question. I hear it a lot.
Yeah. Is there anybody else?
This is Don. I was going to make a comment. I don't think you covered it. Was the program they have at St. David's where they evaluate your driving skills. We did that, and I thought that was a very effective way to, to sort of convince somebody maybe they shouldn't be driving.
Absolutely. And it's St. David's. I often, I got confused on whether it was Baylor Scott and White or St. David's. And you're right, Dawn, it is St. David's. And if anybody, I have that number, if anybody wants to write that down, it's 512-544-8140. And you can find their website at stdavidsrehab.com.
So Shannon, one more time, the telephone number.
Sure, it's area code 512-544-8140. And the website is stdavidsrehab.com.
All right, I put that in the chat box.
Oh, perfect.
I'm a chat box kind of gal. I need to see it in with my eyes.
I have another question. This time. This is Don. If you have long-term care insurance, which we do, does the consulting for the caregiver, like you do, Sarah, is that covered under long-term care insurance, or is that separate?
No, it is simply for care. It will not cover room and board either. So what I do in offering an initial complimentary consultation, if we go down that road of looking at long-term placement, assisted living, dementia care, then my fee for the service that I'm providing you is paid for by the community of all the really good options that you're given. So my fee is paid by them. It's in essence a brokerage fee. The majority of people who do what I do, in essence, are sellers agents for the senior housing communities. I work my business as a buyer's agent. I work for you. So I'll help you negotiate that fee, but it is not paid for long-term, although it is a very good tool to have in our back pocket when we begin talking to these senior housing communities and saying, yes, there are long-term care insurance. We know how it pays, get out your policy. We know if there's an exclusionary period. I'm also going to give a plug for home care as well. Long-term care insurance will pay for home care. It pays for the care that is actually given hand to hand for your loved one. So you can actually begin that at home if that's what your option is. You don't absolutely have to move to a secondary setting to be able to use it.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, it looks like there might be some questions on the chat. I'm not quite sure. I can't seem to open that chat box open. I don't know if anybody else can.
Bonnie was giving us information. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. At the recommendation of physicians, both of my parents were evaluated by the adult driving program at St. David's Hospital. We were very impressed with how thorough and compassionate they were. It does require a physician referral.
Okay.
So to have that conversation with the physician, say, will you write us a referral to that adult driving program at St. David's? And then they can go through that program. Thank you for that, Bonnie.
Thank you.
I'm surprised nobody has asked me about long-term care options as far as secondary setting. I get that question all the time. So what does that look like and what are all my options? So
this is Bonnie. I actually do have some questions that would kind of follow along that line.
Perfect.
I'm in East Texas. My parents are in Georgetown. My sister is in Arizona. About 1 year ago, roughly 1 year ago today, my dad had a stroke, and my mother has been tentatively diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia.
Okay.
Although stroke and other things have kept us from getting a complete neurology diagnosis. My interest is largely in what sort of options might allow them to stay in the same place, to be physically near each other. And they have their, they each have challenges that don't match up very well.
So Bonnie, am I understanding that maybe one has a physical because of the stroke and the other has a cognitive issue?
Yeah, it gets probably more complicated than that, but that's the essence of it. That's the primary thing for them. My mother's not cognitively able to be my father's physical caregiver, and my father is not physically able to be my mother's cognitive caregiver.
I see that a lot, and one will compensate for the other, and so they stay in their home oftentimes longer than they should, or just don't get the care into the home longer than they should. There's many options if they want to stay in the home and stay together. A good home care agency is vital to be able to allow them to do that. Safety always being the number one concern. How safe are they in doing that? And then secondly, if you provide all those layers in place for that care, are you going up to 24/7 care with a home care agency, and will your budget allow that? So we always want to look at finances. If we're looking at a secondary setting such as assisted living or dementia care, let me make the determination between the two. All memory care is assisted living, but not all assisted living is dementia care or memory care. It's all licensed under the same umbrella by Texas Health and Human Services. Assisted living typically will allow for physical changes and some cognitive support. When we begin looking down that further road of greater care for dementia, greater cueing, some greater redirection techniques, possibly they might walk out that front door at assisted living and get themselves in an unsafe environment. We have to look at the greater level of care, which would be a secured environment of memory care. They can very successfully, based upon the severity of the cognitive issue, be quite successful at assisted living together in the same room. Knowing what mom's deficits are and dad's deficits, they could certainly provide care, all those ADLs, redirection, cueing, all of that for mom. I do place families together an awful lot of the time. Some memory care communities will not accept someone without a cognitive diagnosis. Some will. So when it's in the greater safety of the couple to actually move to memory care, I do have within my pocket a couple of very good options who will accept them both, knowing that they're giving physical need to both and cognitive care to one. So in essence, big long answer for yes, there are options for you to keep them together. We would just have to look at that entire dynamic of clinicals and to see exactly where they lie on that spectrum.
It makes a lot of sense, thanks. And I had already decided that you might be someone we need to speak to in greater depth, but you raised something that you might be able to answer that I haven't really been able to answer with anyone so far. And this has been going on for about 2 years as far as the dementia goes. So my mother's primary care physician, who is an internal medicine physician, has diagnosed her with dementia, but referred her for a neuropsych evaluation, which has just been derailed multiple times. Is it necessary to have a specialist diagnosis, or is the diagnosis of an internal medicine physician considered sufficient?
Great question, Bonnie. It depends on what they're basing that diagnosis upon. I see an awful lot when we're not specifically looking at a neuropsychiatrist or someone either in the neurology field or in the psychiatry field. Oftentimes in the doctor's office, they're doing what's called an MMSE, a mini mental state exam, or maybe a MOCA, which is a Montreal cognitive assessment. Those in and of itself is not enough to base a diagnosis of dementia on. So they're good information for me. I love to see them because I want to know where they lie on that spectrum. But to have a definitive diagnosis, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that cannot be performed until after death. We can give a probable diagnosis of dementia from what we see from the behavior set of those signs and symptoms, that overall arcing umbrella of dementia. What signs and symptoms are you seeing, and how does it most closely line up with either frontotemporal, Alzheimer's, Lewy body? If it's way late in life and we know we're going to go to a memory care community, oftentimes we kind of weigh that against, does it really matter we have a diagnosis at this point? Care is going to be care. We know what care we're going to give. If it is an absolute, we have to have it, I do refer to an awful lot of neurologists. I work with a couple of clinics in particular that I refer to an awful lot. If it's important to the family, if it's important for placement, it will directly affect care.
I think that's one of the questions that we've kind of come to. I mean, the idea of the full evaluation, that's maybe 6 to 8 hours in length. My mother's completely resistant to that.
Sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. At this point, we know mom has some cognitive impairments.
Yes.
We know that maybe the road we want to go down. Sometimes it's a technicality, we have it, but to put her through a 6-hour cognitive assessment, and it's going to be hard to get her there in the first place, we'll just weigh that against, do we absolutely have to have it? Will it change anything for us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Sarah, and following up with Bonnie's question, and I'm not fairly familiar with this either. Do you have to have a diagnosis of dementia to go into memory care?
Some will not admit without it.
Okay.
Some will come to do an assessment and some providers are so good at what they do, can sit and have a conversation and recognize all their deficits. Are they having difficulties sequencing, cognitively mapping? That means retracing your steps. Are they having difficulties in thought processes, executive functioning? Are they saying the same questions over and over again? And they can get a really good sense of where your loved one may be on that spectrum, and will admit without a definitive diagnosis. So it really depends on the provider.
Okay. Good questions. Does anybody have anything else?
I will mention that I have a 12-page document called Your Guide to Long-Term Care. I'd be happy to send to anyone if you'd like to go to my website. At the very bottom on the left, you can put in your email address, and we'll get that sent to you. We'd be happy to do that. So again, that website is Senior Living Advisors Austin. No of. And we'll get that sent to you. It's a good basic document on everything to consider.
And I can follow up with you all too. If for some reason, if someone didn't get the website, I can send a follow-up with Sarah's contact information and everything, so that you can reach out to her and have that kitchen table conversation. If you think of a question later on and didn't have a chance, to ask her a question, feel free to reach out to her, reach out to us. This is why we're here. This is our why, is to reach out to caregivers to help you find these resources in any area. This is a great conversation to have. So I'm glad that you all were able to join us today. I want to give one more opportunity. If there's anybody, the last question, anybody wants to, to ask Sarah, but you have a chance.
There is a question in the chat box. Do I need to have the primary doctor's referral for diagnosed or evaluate by a neuro? I believe what you're asking is to go to a neurologist. Do I have to have a referral from the primary? Would that be the question? It would really depend upon your insurance. Most HMOs, you have to go through your primary. If you have a PPO or you're paying privately, let's say a direct primary care nurse practitioner or medical doctor, no, you can directly go. But sometimes you have to, with HMOs, you have to go through your primary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
This is Don. Kind of a related question. If you have a long-term care policy and have not yet activated it, is the proper way to do that to get the diagnosis from like a neurologist or what? Or how does that work to actually activate a long-term care policy? And what documentation or whatever do you need to do that?
Typically, what we're to activate that, have your policy handy and read through it. Know exactly if there's an exclusionary period. Some will say you must already be paying for care coming out of your pocket for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or maybe so many days, like 100 days of continuous care, or however that exclusionary period reads. But typically long-term care policies require that you meet 2 of the 5 ADLs. So dressing and grooming, toileting, bathing, transfers, and eating independently. Mm-hmm. So if 2 of those are met, then you can apply or begin a period of care with the long-term care policy holder, and they will begin your time. The time will start ticking on that. Some long-term care policies are given to where there's a bucket of money, and you can go through those at whatever rate you are using those monies, and when it's gone, it's gone. There are some that are written to where they pay so much per day, and that's the max. Anything over that amount is out of your pocket. And then there are some that were taken out 30, 40 years ago, which are just extraordinary. I see them from time to time, that pay as much as possible in perpetuity. Those are, you just don't see those anymore. But I've run across a couple in my last 2 years of being in private practice that we see that from time to time. So really having a copy of that policy, knowing what it reads, what it will allow and what it won't allow is imperative.
Shannon,
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I've been a caregiver now for 5.5 years for my wife. And it was just really getting to be burdensome. And finally, because the last 3 months, she's really gone downhill. I just recently, 2 weeks ago, got her into a memory care facility. And so we exercised our long-term care. I haven't had reimbursement yet, because the way it works is I have to pay the facility and then I will get reimbursed my per day from the long-term care insurance company. But I had to do all the research the best I could, either by phone calls or by online, because with the virus thing, you couldn't go visit anywhere. You can't get in there, you can't see them. So I was flying about half blind, but not totally. So
Yeah.
there were several good ones that I thought would satisfy the need, and I found one that one particular agency or memory care would only accept somebody with 14 days of continuous temperature measurements, and I didn't even have a thermometer.
Yeah, basic.
That actually is a state regulation put forth from the CDC that came out about a week ago across the state of Texas. A long-term care facility, anywhere from independent assisted dementia care or skilled nursing, they are to be isolated for 14 days after move-in. No
Right.
exception.
And
No
she's been isolated.
Yeah. Well, Barry, thank you for caring for your wife for 5.5 years. I know that was probably long and hard, but done out of love. And so thank you.
Well, it's
Can I ask a
besides being a bad time with the COVID virus. Mother's Day is Sunday. Her birthday is a week later, and our 52nd anniversary is 3 weeks after that. So it's just not the best of timing.
I imagine that made it an even harder decision to make. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of what I do is placement. In Travis and contiguous counties, there are 350 right around there, senior housing communities. I know them all. I know the good, bad, and the ugly. And so I oftentimes work as the family's advocate in looking for such arrangements. So I know that had to be hard, not knowing the industry and what you were looking for, but hopefully you have made a very good decision, and that's a long-term situation for you guys.
I'm sleeping good at night.
Good.
Yeah. And definitely, especially right now with the holidays and anniversaries and birthdays, talk to them and find ways on how you can still stay connected, for yourself, for your family, for her, whether it's through cards, driving by, just finding ways, if they're able to do some type of video chat, looking for different options right now, so that she also, because she can also understand it's hard for her right now. It's probably confusing, and then the self-isolation that she's having to go under, and then for yourself and for your family. And
Yeah, we've done a video chat.
Good.
The communities are also required to do that. I watched a video directly before this webinar put out on the Facebook page of the Texas Long-Term Care Ombudsman's Office. And that live webinar should be on their Facebook page in what are the rules and regulations governing long-term care at this point, considering the pandemic. Might be a good video for everyone to watch. I believe it was about 45 minutes long.
Okay, and can you put that in the chat also so that if anybody wants to go on there, they can get that website again? Where do you go to find that video?
The Facebook page of the Texas Long-Term Care Ombudsman.
Perfect.
Jackie, I don't know how much time we have left, but you did pose a great question. If you know, Shannon, if we have time to answer that now, great. If we don't, let's, Jackie, I can get with you later.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's answer Jackie. And I know Dawn also might have had a question, another question.
Okay.
If everybody has an opportunity, let's, if we can, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So Jackie asked the question, how would I get my husband to go and stay in a long-term facility when I can't even get him to go to respite care once in a while? Wow. Yeah, sometimes it would depend on what his cognitive level is. If there's some dementia at play, we may just not be trying the right type of care. Respite programs are voluntary. They are about 4 hours in length, provide meals, activities, great engagement. I'm going to give a plug for Alzheimer'S Texas, as well as there's a phenomenal list of respite programs here in the Central Texas area listed on the Alzheimer'S Texas website, and which is www.txalz.org. So yes, if he doesn't want to stay, if that's not what he wants to do, he can leave at any given point in time. Now, they're very, very good at redirection, at cueing, getting him engaged, involved, for those early stage memory programs. How would I get my husband to go? That one oftentimes is the challenge. Sometimes I've seen to where if they're coming from a hospital or a skilled nursing facility, we will in essence have the dialogue or the narrative that we're continuing therapies until it's safe to come home. Sometimes that works. Whatever is your situation, we're going to come up with that. I do know that this is a sticky situation because a lot of families say, I can't lie to my loved one. I think it's compassionate fiblets. And I know that's an interesting terminology, but I've known some individuals that were brought to a memory care community under the guise of, we're having work done to the house. We need you to stay at the little bed and breakfast around the corner until the work gets done on the house. We're going to make it compassionate. However, that conversation needs to happen to get them through the door. The memory care communities are very good, extra additional training in working with that individual to distract, to engage highly, and to really make that a place they don't want to leave, to where it's safe and very welcoming. And so they're masters at this. And so if we can sit down and have that conversation about what that may look like and how we can make that happen, I'd be happy to have that conversation. It's going to be different for every family. Every family is going to have a different narrative. So, but that's hard for families.
Yeah, it really is. And I know in our experience too, our best, you know, and everything that Sarah said, you know, you try and you come up with what's best with knowing your loved one. Our families use our support groups because a lot of them have either gone through it, they're going through it, or they're not there yet. So they're in different stages, different phases. And when you get to that decision, you rely on each other, because there is no book, right? There is no handbook. This is on the job training as caregivers that we're learning, and our best is the learning through others, and what works. Try as maybe, hear what other people have done. You're right. We've heard it from where someone doesn't want to go to the respite program, and then when they get there, they enjoy it, and there is a resistance, and we help with that transition. They have a lot of assisted living and memory cares have where you can go on vacation, and I'm gonna be in the hospital, and they have to have respite, whether it's in home or you can stay in an assisted living for a week period of time, and they've done that as a transition, and plus you get to see if this is the one you want to go to. Is this where it meets our needs? So you have those options that you can try that as well too, for like a shorter period of stay for respite. It's just a matter of knowing your loved one and trying as best as you can. It's not an easy decision, and it is stressful. 100% it is stressful. And having those conversations, like Sarah said, talk to their memory care coordinators as well too, and ask them, can you give me some tips? What have you seen that was successful in their experience? And then draw that further, for you to make that choice. Yeah. Dawn, did you have a question as well?
I have several. I probably should just call Sarah and meet with her, because there are a lot of dimensions of it.
Okay.
It has to do with current living and current planned living situation, when to try to activate or do. And a short question maybe for Barry is, I haven't done anything at this point to try to activate the long-term care insurance, and the question is whether, because I'm basically taking care of my wife now, and I have been for a while, and I can leave home for a few hours, but I couldn't think of going out of town overnight or anything. That's sort of where we are, and I'm trying to figure out, is it important if there is a 90-day clause, exclusion clause, and whether I should be, and this is a policy through TRS, which you may know all about. It's a good policy. Whether I should be communicating with them on this now, or whether I should wait until I need to actually use the policy, because there is that 90-day exclusion period where you have to pay yourself, at least for some of it. And so I have a number of questions. I don't know if you have a simple answer to that question, whether you should be communicating with the company at this point, or whether you should wait until you're actually looking to get money from them to help you out.
In short, you can always contact them and say, we don't have a plan put in place right now. We are working through that and speaking with someone to help us do that, but we want a copy of the policy if you don't have one.
I have a copy of the policy, but I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, your financial advisor who sold it to you will be able to answer those questions if you're still in contact with them.
Yeah.
Hello.
And if you're not in contact with them, any other financial advisor would be able to read through that policy and let you know what it reads.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Melody.
Hi, Melody.
Hi. I haven't had my video on for a couple of work-related issues, but this has been so helpful. I just wanted to follow up quickly, if I may. We're all learning together. To the gentleman who just asked a question about long-term care insurance, I totally get it that every policy is different. I just want to encourage, however, that that gentleman start calling about that long-term care insurance policy. I have a similar situation through teacher retirement system. And what I didn't realize was, in addition to some home care benefits and long-term care benefits, there were some respite care benefits. And they were written as to where you use them or lose them. And so there's no incentive not to try to get some help. It's not a lot, but every little bit helps, I think. And so I learned that lesson. I haven't actually pulled down any benefits yet, but I didn't realize that until I called about the policy. So I would just encourage anyone and everyone who has the blessing of a long-term care policy to start calling now, even if you're not ready or you don't think you're ready to use any of the benefits. Thank you for letting me add that.
Thank you.
Oh, Melody, great information. I had not heard that about TRS. I didn't know that it covered rest, but I've not had that opportunity to learn that. Some long-term care policies will ask you before they even will enact it, where are they going, so that we can make sure it's on our list.
Right.
It doesn't have to be on their list. You get the option to choose where you want those. Those monies are paid to you, not the community in which you're going.
Yeah, I was using Don before, as far back as last August. I was having a lady come into the house to stay with my wife on an hourly basis with no guarantee of is it 1 hour, 3 hours, or half a day or something. So I was paying her out of pocket, and then I filed a reimbursement form with John Hancock, and I got reimbursed for her time in the house, which was only a couple days a week. But she was an independent contractor, but she had previously worked for one of the big agencies. So she had training, and she actually qualified and met John Hancock's requirement for being licensed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Good input.
Thank you all for sharing that. I put Sarah's number on there. I hope you all can see that on the chat. I figured out how to use that, by the way. Made it by the.
I love it.
I clicked on it and I was like, oh, that's how I get the chat. We're always learning. Always learning.
Always learning.
If there is not any other questions, that is Sarah's number, 832-794-8810. Thank you, Sarah, for doing this. It means a lot to us at Alzheimer'S Texas, but you know, for all our families, these are questions. As you can tell, there's more questions, and I'm glad that we were able to answer some of those questions, and hope that everybody can get whatever question they have answered through you. We appreciate it. There's more. Sarah does a tremendous, great job. I really respect Sarah a lot, because she truly does care for her families. She looks at different options. It's not just a matter of what's best for her. It's best what's for you, for the caregiver, for the families, and I see it in all her work. Sarah and I are also ambassadors for the Leander Chamber of Commerce. So I'm going to plug in for that, because we're working our areas, and we're trying to get this help to the Leander, Liberty Hill, Vernon areas as much as possible, because there's very limited resources, and having these conversations all the time with each other about how can we improve, what can we do better, what can we do different. These are hard times, these are difficult times, but this Zoom call and this series is one of the best things that came out of this pandemic. Being able to reach out to as much people as possible. We would continue our ALZ Talk series. We are going to continue to have different senior experts every Wednesday. Next week, we're going to be having Amy from Aging is Cool, and she's going to talk about activities, ways what we can do to keep our brains active. What can we do at home? Just wonderful. Like, they do a wonderful service, and Sarah, has worked with Amy as well too, so she can say, like, they are doing a tremendous job to make sure that we are using our brains as the best ability as possible. So if you are not enrolled in that one, sign up for that class. You guys would really enjoy it. You know, so we'll reach out to you, but we'll have hospice, a conversation about what is hospice. I'm eager to learn that one too, because there's always questions on when is that right time to call. We'll have a VA, someone come in next month talking about the VA. So just let us know if there's something that you want to hear. I will help you find an expert so that we can get those questions answered. So thank you all for joining us today. It is our pleasure to have this conversation with you all. You have Sarah's information. I will follow up with you all with sending you this recorded presentation, so you have that. I will also send you that information for St. David's. I know it's on the chat that Sarah put on here, but I'll send that out to you. And Sarah can follow up with you on that. I think it's through Texas Long-Term Care. It's their Facebook page that has that video. So that way, if you have any other questions, just let us know and we'll be happy to answer them.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All. Thank you, everybody. You all have a great day. Thank you, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hmm?